So first of all, I want to dedicate tonight's shir to Tinek ben Lala Rachel Maschedi, Nirafur Shlema Kreva Shlema, Telachayim Shavrafur Kreva Shlema. Jews get together and wish them a bracha. It's more powerful than Malach Machal. The Tinek ben Lala Rachel should have a complete and speedy recovery. Chaim. The Mishnah says in Ethics of Our Fathers, Pirkei Avos, it says, an angry person cannot teach, and a bashful person cannot learn. It seems like that there's some kind of symbiotic relationship between these two things. That the more bashful you are, the more patient the teacher you need to have. And the more of an angry teacher you are, then the less students you're going to have. The more humility the students have, the more they're able to handle as teachers, a little more stern. The more timid and shy, and the less they're going to be able to learn from the teacher. So you see your child is your student is very bashful, they have to be even more light, So these halachas are nothing to be ashamed of, but unfortunately people think these halachas are things you shouldn't ask about. They're very shy to ask about these questions. And but the truth is that these halachas are nothing to be embarrassed about, and on the contrary, you can't. An embarrassed person cannot learn. So you have to, whenever you have a question, you have to make sure to have someone to ask the question to. Abel Tanskel told me that he would have people calling him from all over the country. The question always was, am I allowed to be together with my wife tonight? Because they didn't know how to work the calendar. And because they know how to work it, but they wanted to make sure they're doing things right. So Latansky kept calendars for many, many people. And he was able to advise people all over the country. They would call him not just once or twice, to come all the time to know when they're allowed to be together. So there's an easier way. There's an easier way. I'm just mentioning this because the dedication we have to this mitzvah is something that is really more. It's on the echelons of the highest of mitzvahs in Yiddishkeit. So much so, I heard from Mr. Sarah Carmeli that there was a woman who brought a picture of her children she raised in Soviet Russia to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe asked about one of her children, this one's special. Tell me about this one. So she said when she was in Russia, she had to go to the mikveh. And what could you use in a mikveh? She went into a well or to a lake, freezing, cold water, and middle of a Soviet winter. And when she came out of this well, she got dressed and she left, and then she noticed a bandage on her back. So she decided to go back again into the mikveh and to make sure that she did this the right way. So it just shows you how dedicated she was, but also how the Rebbe said there's something special about this child, something that this did for the child that was born because of her sacrifice. Tonight is the 32nd night of the Omer. In the Omer we count 49 days. The first 32 days of the Omer correspond to the word leiv, heart. And the last 17 days of the Omer correspond to the word toiv, leiv toiv, good heart. What we're able to achieve in Tziras HaOmer is having a good heart. By keeping these halachas more carefully, it's not just a blessing for ourselves to have a better character, but it's also a blessing for children who were born already. As we discussed in the last time we met, how the Rebbe advised many parents who had issues with children who were already 20s and their 30s, and advised the parents to be more careful with these halachas. And this was a blessing retroactively for all all of their children. So there's no limit to goodness. That means even if you're keeping the halachas very carefully, you also Chaim, please go out into that to upstairs. Bala, Chaim, please go upstairs. Thank you. So there's no limit to how careful you have to keep these halachas, and therefore, even people who learn these halachas already, there's always room to learn more, and it's something worth investing in because it's a blessing for not just for a good character and a good character of your children, is a blessing for health, a blessing for shalom bayis, a blessing for peace at home. All the blessing for parnasa, all the things that we wish for. Keeping these halachas more carefully is something that enhances everything. It's really can't overemphasize how much the Rebbe advised people who had a myriad of issues, constellations of issues. The Rebbe told them to keep the halachas of family purity more precisely. So in the last class, we covered basically the laws of distance and during the time of Nida. And tonight we're going to learn the halachas of the laws about the calendar. The basic principle before we get to the calendar that everyone's familiar with, I hope, is that a husband and wife are forbidden to be together during the time of the period that a woman has, which is an average between 4.5 and 6 days. And then she counts for 7 days until she goes to the mikveh. So it's going to be somewhere above 12 days of separation. Besides the 12 days of separation, there are other days that are husband and wife not allowed to be together as well, because although there's no bleeding and she's been to the mikveh, but still, because the Chachamim saw that it's possible for the period to come on this day, there's a likelihood that the period may come on a certain day. Therefore, the Chachamim said that you have to separate on various days. We shall see what those days are. But I want to underscore that what we're learning is not chumrah. It's not stringency. If there's something that's a stringency, I'll tell you. This is halacha. It's a clear halacha. It applies to everybody. The reason why I think some people aren't so knowledgeable about these halachas is because it's just intimidating the amount of work you need to do to keep the calculation. But Baruch Hashem, today we have a great app, Mikvah calendar app, run by mikvah.org. I think the administrator is Chaya Klein, does an amazing job in this app for the last 11 years. And so you don't have to be afraid of knowing the calendar, because it really does the work for you. Of course, it's good to have, it's not only good, it's necessary to have a written calendar as well. You shouldn't just rely on the online one. However, don't wait till you figure out how to do things by hand before you begin learning the halachas. When I teach someone how to put on tefillin, I always teach them how to put away the tefillin. Why? Very important. Because he doesn't know how to put the tefillin away, he's gonna be afraid to ever put on tefillin again, because he knows that once he puts them on, he's gonna have to put them away. So I want to teach tonight. The most important thing is how to use this app, and so that you'll be confident yourself to keep these halachas by yourself, and you won't need to worry about, are you doing it right, not doing it right. But of course, it's important to have a written calendar as well. So I made this what's it called? This PowerPoint. It's from the prehistoric days, and therefore it's not so easy to follow. It's made with, only someone under the age of 10 years old knows how to be tech savvy with making PowerPoints, and I passed 10 years old a long time ago, so I apologize for the hieroglyphics I'm using in this PowerPoint. So before we go to the laws of the calendars, just very briefly, I want to say this. There are some things that you can't go to mikveh unless you do. A woman can't go to mikveh unless she has at least one kosher examination on day one. And second of all, she has to have, in other words, she does a hefsek tara. What's called hefsek tara means she examines herself before sundown, not a minute after sundown, but exactly before the time of sundown of that day. And the second thing is she has to do one examination the next day. So for example, today, a woman did an examination before sundown today. Today is Wednesday, so she would have to at least one examination on Thursday, another examination on the following Wednesday, in order to be able to go to mikveh a week from today on Wednesday night. That's the bare minimum in order for her to be able to go to mikveh. But God wouldn't have come down from heaven to tell us all these other halachas if they weren't important for us to know. So although she's able to go to mikveh with just by doing this, but obviously if Hashem is telling us more, it's not because he's bored, it's because we need this. This is necessary for us for all of our own benefit, both materially and spiritually, as mentioned before. Okay. If, however, a woman did not do examination on day 1 or day 7, I wouldn't tell you that you have to automatically delay going to mikveh to the next day. I would tell you to call a rabbi, because there are various mitigating circumstances that can be in your situation. So if a woman does examination tonight and she forgets to do examination tomorrow, and she does another examination during the week, and she does it Thursday, she did one, and Shabbos she did another. She's supposed to do two every day. From Thursday, it's supposed to be one in the morning, and again one before sundown, every single day until she goes to mikvah. But let's say she didn't do all of them, she did some of them. So you should call a rabbi, because there can be mitigating circumstances which would allow her to go to mikvah a week from now on Wednesday night. Okay, this is a screenshot from the app. The P on the over here is for period. And this period began on a Monday morning. That's why if you look on the mouse is, it says Sunday night and Monday, all under the heading of Monday. The reason why it's under the heading of Monday is because our calendar, our Jewish calendar, the Yom Sheni, the second day of the week, begins on Sunday night. So in this Mikvah calendar app, it has correctly the days aligned so that Sunday night and Monday day are both counted as a day of Yom Sheni, the day of Monday. So the period in this analogy began on Rosh Chodesh on a Monday, and HT means Hefsek Tara, a period according to our custom, according to the halacha of the Alter Rebbe. She cannot examine herself before 5 days have passed, and therefore she waits from Monday day until Friday before Shkia. Friday before sundown, she's allowed to make her first attempt to making a hefsek tara. If the period began on Sunday night, same thing. As long as the period began sometime on Monday, even a minute before sundown, she counts a minimum of 5 days, and she does hefsek tara on Friday. Mr. Dayani is thinking, well, Sephardim, we have 4 days. Okay, Sephardim have their thing. We're learning the halacha of the Alter Rebbe now. Okay. There is another app for Sephardim as well, which I'm sure you know, right? The Sephardim have also another app. This app that goes according to the sheet of the Alter Rebbe. Okay. Examinations are done when the period is over before sundown. That's when she is able to, again, make her first attempt at hefsek tara. Then again, she follows that first examination with 2 examinations in the morning and eve for the next 7 days. As mentioned before, this is not just a chumrah, it's not a stringency, this is halach. There's a couple of basic things about the calendar before we get into the details. First of all, the English calendar will not help you at all. The English calendar is worthless when you want to figure out the Taras Mishpach. Again, as we saw in the calendar, the night goes before the day, and the way to calculate every day is to, first of all, to know is that every day has 2 components: there's sundown to sunrise, and there is sunrise to sundown. Sundown to sunrise is the night, and sunrise to sundown is the day. So there are 3 separate occasions that a husband and wife may have to separate. Again, it's possible that none of these occur from the time your wife goes to mikveh until her next period. It's possible that none of these occur, but you have to know what they are. It's not that these halachas are cumbersome in addition to the separation of the 12 days. It's a question of knowledge, knowing when they are. So there are 3 possible situations where halacha would say that it's likely for a woman to have her period, and therefore, although she doesn't have the period then, still the Torah says that you have to separate anyways. And doesn't matter how likely it is in your situation. It doesn't matter if you say your wife is on the pill, and it doesn't go by the likelihood. It goes by halacha. The pill has halachic, a birth control pill has halachic weight when halacha says so, but it doesn't go by what the percentage chances of her having the period. It goes by what Hashem said is a time of separation. So here I hope I could use these terms and without translating them, but I think probably better to use English terms as well because people aren't familiar with them. First is called Vesat HaChodesh. Vesat HaChodesh means the time of the month when you have to separate, which is connected to the day of the month or the night in the month when she had her period, which has to do with the day of the Jewish calendar, like Sivan 5 or Iyar 3. That's Vesat HaChodesh is associated with a day of the month or a night in a month. if her period, as we shall see, was, let's say, on the third day of Nisan by daytime at 10 a.m., so the following month, on the third day of Iyar, a husband and wife have to separate on that exact same day of the month. Separate if their period began on the third day of Nisan, so a period finished by the 8th of Nisan, and she went to mikvah a week later, and now her period didn't come yet. It's now the third day of Iyar. Still, during the daytime of the third day of Iyar, husband and wife have to separate, but not just because of the laws of modesty, but because of the laws of Taras Mishpacha. Not just because of the Torah says that it's better in general for husband and wife to be together at nighttime, but because it's forbidden to be together halachically, because this is the same time the period came, and therefore it's just like it came last month at this day. So there's a likelihood that it will come again. Now, again, I want to point out that there are some things here which are counterintuitive. Some things you would say, well, I wouldn't bet on that, Rabbi. Not my wife. My wife's period doesn't work like that. It doesn't matter. This is what Hashem has told us. This is something which it doesn't matter at all if the period actually comes that day or doesn't come that day. This is something which, in fact, it says in the Shulchan Aruch that if someone was together with his wife on the third day of Iyar and she didn't get her period, it says that he needs kapara, needs to have atonement for that, even though nothing happened, even though the period didn't start. So you would think like whatever he risked it and nothing happened, he's okay. No, the halacha is that there is a reason for them to be separate, whether or not the period actually comes. So that's Vesta Chodesh. Vesta Flaga, and we shall see, has to do with her personal interval. That means that the length of time that she actually had between the end of the period before and the beginning of the next period. So in order to calculate Vesta Flaga, you'd have to know when her period finished and when her next period began. You know when her period finished, next period began. So then when that second period finishes, you would count the amount of time that it was between the end of period 1 and the beginning of period 2. Don't worry right now about that. I'll explain it when we get up to it. Just want to translate what those words mean. It has to do with their personal interval. It doesn't have to do with Jewish days, not Jewish days, calendar. It has to do with how much time was there. It's a clock. The Vesta Flaga thing is a clock. How much time was there between period 1 and period 2? And that's how much time you have to be concerned about when that time elapses. Yeah? Okay. Third time the husband have to separate is on the what's called oina beininus. Oina beininus means the average time of a woman's period is 30 days between period 1 and period 2. If a woman sees it has a period on the first day of Nisan, so the average woman will have her period, as says the Gemara, on the 30th day of Nisan. So the entire 30th day of Nisan, a husband and wife have to separate. Okay. The separation on these dates is different than the separation of the actual period. A woman has actual period. Last time there's all these halachas of separation. Separation on these dates does not have the same status. Number one, separation is only from intercourse. That's the only halachic requirement of separation these dates is from intercourse. However, there is also a stringency of separating. I wouldn't call it a stringency. I would call it actually the minhag. This is what people do. To not to hug or kiss at all during this time either. Although the language of Shulchan Aruch is a little lighter about this separation, but this is also a requirement that's brought in Shulchan Aruch that a husband and wife shouldn't touch each other at all during the time of the separation of the days, not hugging and kissing, but you're allowed to pass things to each other, you're allowed to say words of endearment that we learned about last time. That's not a problem at all during this time, during these 3 dates that we mentioned. But actual touching and a wave of endearment, that's something that should not be done at that time. But the strict prohibition is from intercourse. That's the minhag. So that's what you didn't do. Any questions so far? Make sense? We'll get there. Good question. Very good question. We'll see, because not every month has 29 days or 30 days. So we'll see. Very good. Okay. So here's the word that we're using. The word is oina. Oina means a time period. So every day has 2 oinas. Sunrise to sunset. Sunset to sunrise is a day oina and a night oina. Sunrise, sunset is the day oina. Sunset, sunrise is the night oina. use that word, oina. In the calendar also use that word, so try to remember that word. This separation of these 3 dates is only necessary if a woman doesn't have a set time that she always has a period. If, however, she has a set time for her period, then she doesn't have to. The Chachamim weren't concerned. The Torah is not concerned with the likelihood of other possible causes for her period, because she is established 3 times in a row that her period always happens in the 28th day, and it always happens at the same time. Since it happens 3 times in a row, so it's called a chazaka. It's an assumption that her period will come in that time, and therefore we don't have to separate any other occasion, because she has an established time when her period is, or she has a unique feature in her life that whenever she sneezes 3 times, boom, that's when her period starts. This is very rare for it to be exactly set to a fixed pattern. Be close to the fixed pattern, but if it's close to the fixed pattern, it doesn't matter. It only matters if it's a fixed pattern. Now you'll notice when you use the app, it will tell you that your wife has a fixed pattern, but you will also notice that no change is made in the calendar as a result. That's because it's very complicated, the halachas of a fixed pattern, and therefore Rabbi Latansky Al Vashalom is no longer here, but you'll have to call a rabbi. Actually, the app has rabbis that will answer your questions on the app, so it's good to consult because the app will not change. The app will not compute anything. Right? It will just inform you that that's what's going on. We have to do the extra calculations that involves with a rabbi. Question so far? It makes sense? Yeah? Okay. So yes, if it happens 3 times in a row, call a rabbi, make sure you're doing things right. Most women do not have a set time when their period begins, and therefore they have to be concerned about these 3 possible causes for the period. Either it's the time of the month that may have caused the period, or it's because of her specific personal interval between her periods was last at this specific time, and or she's the average woman who has a 30-day period. So during that time that the Torah says to separate, you have to separate the entire time from sunrise to sunset and sunset to sunrise. Let's see an example. Let's go to the first category that we mentioned before, Vesta Chodesh. Her period began on the 5th day of Cheshvan. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the 5th day of Cheshvan, her period begins. So what's the halacha? All right. Her period began on the 5th day of Tishrei. And now it's the 5th day of Cheshvan. So now it's a month later to separate the whole morning of the 5th day of Cheshvan. Follow? Okay. Besides separation, she also has to examine herself on that day to after the time the period began. So on the 5th day of Tishrei, her period began at 10 o'clock a.m. So now the 5th day of Cheshvan comes, she has to do a bedika anytime after her period began. Anytime between the time her period began at 10 a.m. until sundown, she has to do a bedika. Everyone follow? This is called Vesta Chodesh. And even though she checked herself and the period did not begin, still you have to separate until the end of that time period. She checked herself at 10 a.m., nothing's going on. So you could be together on the night of the 6th of Cheshvan right away, but you can't be together on the 5th day of Cheshvan. Okay. This is all regarding a day oina. Day oina meaning that it happened during the daytime. Separate until Shkia, it has to separate until sundown, and a bedika should be done after the time the period began. When you go into the app, you right away should put in as soon as the period happens, before you forget when the period started, so you should know the earliest time. It can sometimes affect your day when you're able to make the examination. You can't make an examination, so even though it's kosher, do it anytime before sundown. But sundown changes. 5 o'clock is sundown, 4 o'clock is sundown, 7 o'clock is sundown. So it's good to know the earliest time. You're allowed to technically do the dika anytime till sundown, even later. It's better to do it closer to the time that it started, but it's good to put into the calendar the exact time the period began, so you will be conscious of it when it comes up. As mentioned, to separate whether or not the bdika was clear. For a night, I know. separate the entire night, whether or not the bdika was clear. And you check in the morning, just like it is for a day aina. Now, although her period began, let's say, on the example of the fifth night of Cheshvan, the fifth night of Tishrei, rather. And it was 3 o'clock in the morning, she went to the bathroom on the night of the fifth night of Tishrei, and 3 o'clock in the morning, she discovered that her period began, and the halach is she doesn't have to wake up in the next month, middle of 3 o'clock in the morning to do the bedika. She wakes up the next morning and does the bedika on the next morning, which is all after the nighttime, still okay. She does bedika in the morning, and life is good. Follow? Okay. If you forgot to check, the difference is opinion of what you should do if a woman forgot to check. Should she check anyways whenever she remembers? Some poskim say, like I read over here, click when you remember. Some poskim say, don't worry about it, move on, don't check, because in general, although the Gemara says it's better to check as many times as possible, nowadays the halacha it has changed for many reasons, and you only supposed to check when you have to check. You're not supposed to check when you don't need to check. Except we'll get to Ein Beinis a little later, but this is for except for Ein Beinis. Very good. On the 30th day, if you forgot to check, you're not allowed to be together with your wife until you actually hear from her mouth telling you clearly. Just like when a woman goes to the mikvah, she has to tell her husband she went to the mikvah verbally. So too, after the 30th day has passed, the husband and wife are not allowed to be together until she actually tells her husband she checked. So if she forgot to check, she can't be together with her husband until she actually, as we'll see this in Mr. Shem soon, the Ein Beinis. Okay, please jump in with any questions. So it sounds like a lot. So let's see why this is lucrative, why this is beneficial. Number one, Abshua ben Levi said, those who are careful to separate at the anticipated time of menstruation, merit to have children who are prominent leaders of Jewish people, is a bracha for the spirituality and the beauty and the health of your children. And the Torah itself says, and the Gemara learns out from this pasuk, in addition to separating on the actual time of the period, you have to separate close to that time as well, meaning the time where it's likely, halachically, what halacha considers it likely for the period to start. Okay, so that's a chodesh. Let's give an example, practical example. If it began on the 4 p.m., the 5th of Tevis, let's see how it looks in the calendar. Separate the day on the 5th of Shvat. That's how this works. Let's see how it looks in the calendar. So, separate until nightfall of the 6th of Shvat. So here's how it works. Her period began over here in the nightfall of the 5th of Tevis. It continued until the 9th of Tevis. So what happens? What's going to happen the next month? When does she have to separate? Will help if I sing the Jeopardy needed. Have separate on the 5th. When on the 5th?
On the
Night of the 5th. Very good. So actually, I messed up on this app. It looks like I must have written this wrong incorrectly. You're right. If the period began the 5th of Tevis, you have to separate on there should be a circle over here on the nighttime of the 5th of Shvat. That's correct what you said. This circle is for the Vesach Chodesh, and I must have done this wrong. But the app, Baruch Hashem, usually does not make mistakes. The separation should be on the 5th night of Shvat. The additional diamond there, as we'll see soon, because it happens to be, this is also the 30th day. If a month has 29 days, so the 30th day is going to be the same day as a time of the month of the time before. So if the period began on the 5th of Tevis, Tevis has 29 days, so the 30th day from the 5th of Tevis is going to be the entire 24-hour period of the 5th of Shvat. Ein Beinis, I didn't say before, we'll get to it. It's not just the exact time that it happened, it's the entire 30th day from the night of the 5th of Shvat until the day of the 5th of Shvat. Okay. Ein Beinis, how does it work? Separating the 30th day, and when should you examine yourself? You have to separate from the nighttime of Ein Beinis until all the way till the sundown of the next day. So when do you examine? You should examine yourself before sundown. And if it's not difficult, you should do another bdika. It's a stringency, not a halachic obligation, to do another bdika after it became dark already. So one bdika during the daytime of the 30th day, before sundown, and another one is a stringency to do again after dark. Follow? That's the 30th day. So you count day one as when the period started, and day 30, counting that as day 1, what day 30? So an example I gave before, but the first of Nisan is day 1, day 30, the 30th of Nisan. So from the beginning of the nighttime of the 30th of Nisan, until the end of the 30th of Nisan, to separate. During the daytime, she does a b'dika, and if it's not difficult for her, and she wants to be machmir, she wants to be strict, it's good to do another b'dika after sundown, after dark. Okay, regarding the Venus, as Yitzchak mentioned before, number one, a husband has to ask his wife if she actually did this b'dika. The other ones you don't have to ask. Number two, if she forgot to do it, she's not allowed to be together with her husband until she does b'dika. Number three, if let's say she made it impossible to check because she had a bath or a shower, or she went swimming, and now you can't tell if there ever was blood there before because maybe it was washed off. So in that scenario, you should call a rav about what the halacha should be. Okay, the Vesta Chodesh will usually be one of the oinus or the day before. On a 30-day month, so the 30th day, in the example of Nisan, let's say the period began on the first day of Nisan, so the 30th day is going to be the 30th day of Nisan. But in Tevis, which has 29 days, the 30th day from the first day of Tevis is going to be when? The first day of Tevis will be on the first day of Shvat. The 30 days from the first of Tevis is going to be, since Tevis is 29 days, the 30th day is going to be on the first day of Shvat. I'll be the 30th day. So when's going to be, if the period began on the first day of Tevis, when is the time of the month you have to separate? When's the Vesa Chodesh? Again, in the daytime of the first of Tevis.
If it's the daytime, you should separate. Starts in the daytime.
Daytime of what date?
On the first.
On the first of which month? Next month of Shvat. So the Vesa Chodesh will actually occur in the same time as Oina Beinis. The 30th day, when it's a 29-day month, when the period started, the Oina Beinis, which is the 30th day, is going to be the same time as the Vesa Chodesh. So either the Vesa Chodesh will be on the same one, which will mean you wouldn't have any extra separation, or it'll be the night or the day before it. They do fall on the same day. If it's not difficult, do two examinations, one right after the period began, and another one before sundown. So you're doing one after the period began because that's the best time to do a b'dika. It's kosher, as I mentioned before, do a b'dika anytime after the period began until sundown, but it's better to do a b'dika immediately after the same exact time the period began. And because it's the 30th day as well, on the 30th day you do b'dika before sundown, so on that day it's better to do two. Some women have a problem when they do a b'dika that the b'dika itself causes them to bleed, and therefore they try to do as few b'dikas as possible. But if it's not difficult to do b'dika, it's better to do two of them, one after the period began, another one before sundown.
Why after it began?
Because the purpose of the b'dika is to ascertain whether or not the period began at the same time that it did last month. So since it began at 10 a.m., so let's check after at 10 a.m. if it started. It's kosher if you checked it before Shkia, but better closer to the time. So here, because the Oina Bein is the 30th day, you don't have to do the check at the exact time. So the Oina Bein goes before sundown. So therefore, you should do two, one after the period began and one before sundown. If examinations are sensitive, just do one examination before sundown. Okay. So this analogy is the period began on Rosh Chodesh and nighttime of Rosh Chodesh of, and it finishes on Hay of. So when's going to be her? Can you see this on the bottom? See what occurs with it? That's the 30th of Av. It has a yellow for it being the Oina Beinis. It's the 30th day. Av has 30 days. But start in the nighttime of the first of Av, the 30th day is going to be the same month. That's Oina Beinis. Then there is when is going to be the actual Vesa Chodesh. What the Vesa Chodesh means, again, the same time of the month when the period started. It started on Aleph, on the night of Aleph. So besides separating for 30th, you have to separate after the 30th on the first night of, sorry, what do I do over here? Yeah, sorry, first night of Elul. Besides separating on the 30th day of the whole 24-hour period of the month of Av, which is Oina Bein, you also have to separate the time of the month, the following month, which is the month of Elul, to separate the nighttime of Elul. That's what the circle is for, the Vesa Chodesh. that make sense or no? Okay, I'm trying again.
30 days and an extra day.
30 days is because the average woman is 30 days.
Yeah.
And she has to also separate when on the same day of the month when her period started.
Right.
So it started on what's called Vesa Chodesh. So it started on the first night of separating the first night of Elul. Okay, so everything we said till now is according to everybody. All Chabad Rabbanim. There are different opinions among Ashkenazim and Sephardim, but we're going to learn now something which depends who you follow. Within Chabad Rabbanim themselves, there's difference of opinion. Rabbi Chaikin, he told us that in America, you should probably paskin like the American Rabbanim, in Israel, paskin like the Israeli Rabbanim. Generally, the American Rabbanim are more strict about this than the Israeli Rabbanim. The Kitzur Dinitara, which the Rebbe said to make, was it rules like the more stricter opinion. Well, let's just know what these two opinions are. It's not, and Rabbi Farkash is more lenient. So Rabbi Chaikin said, if you live in America, you should follow the American Rabbana. That's what he said. Anyways, I just want to know. But just when you go on the app, there's something called halacha setting. The halachic setting is which opinion you go by. The strict opinion, lenient opinion. So let me tell you what these two opinions are. It's not going to change your life significantly, but the calculations are harder to make if you follow a more stricter opinion. But it's not like it's not going to make a major change in your life. Here are the two opinions. Let's say on 1 month, the period began on the day Oina of the 5th of Tevis. Hey Tevis, you are buying Sfarim. Say Tevis, it's Dida Natzach, and you're in the Sfarim store, and it's 4 o'clock, and you find out that the period began. So the halacha is you have to separate on the following month on the 5th of Shvat. But before the 5th of Shvat arrives, your wife's period already began on the 4th of Shvat. So, and the period continues for 5-6 days. So her period started on the 4th of Shvat. She's still bleeding on the 5th of Shvat. Do we say now, when you get to the month of Adar, that there are 2 days to worry about, both the 4th and the 5th? Or do we say, since the period did not begin on the 5th, it was the middle of the period, so the 5th is canceled? In other words, once a month goes by and she examines herself and didn't have that period at the same time, like the example we had before about Av. She had a period on the first night of Av. Once the first of Elul passes and she doesn't have that period then, when it comes the next month, the month of Tishrei, Aleph is no longer a thing. Aleph, you're allowed to be together in Aleph. Doesn't matter what day it is, you're allowed to be together in Aleph. Aleph is no longer considered an issue. So here, she passed the 5th of Shvat without a period starting, but she still was bleeding that day. So that's the argument between the Chabad Rabbanim. Do we say that it's canceled because it didn't start that day? Or do we say that it's not canceled because she was still bleeding? In other words, the question is really, when we say something gets canceled, does it mean it's canceled because the period didn't start that day, or is it canceled because she wasn't bleeding that day? So let me show you. Her period began on the 5th of Tevis in 1 month. The next month began on the 4th of Shvat. Now it's the month of Adar. It's to separate on both the 4th and 5th day of Adar, or only do you have to separate? For sure, you have to separate in the 4th. That was the most recent one, and that was never canceled. The question is also to separate in the 5th of Adar because we never had a 5th that was clear. So here's how it works. Here's the 5th of Tevis, fiscal 9th of Tevis, better than the 9th. Okay, and in the screen, the analogy I gave is not by 4 p.m. It's a nighttime, unless it was, I guess, an early day in Tevis. Whatever. It started in the nighttime of Monday night, the 5th of Tevis, and then halacha is to separate. Oh, I made a mistake over here as well. Okay, I have to fix this light. When should there be the Vesta Chodesh next month? The month time. It started the night of the 5th of Tevis. When should be the nighttime separation for the next month? What day?
How many days in Shabbat?
Doesn't matter, because it goes by the time of the month, the night of the 5th. But I wrote over here for some reason the day of the 5th. I don't know how I did that. Either way, it's another mistake. It's supposed to be the night of the 5th. And besides that, in this scenario, since the month of Tevis again has 29 days, so the 5th of Shvat, you separate the whole night and day of the 5th of Shvat anyways, because it's the 30th day. So to separate, there should be a circle over here on where there's yellow over here. What do you mean? Tuesday? No, that's how the calendar is. Wednesday is the way the calendar works is that Wednesday is a Jewish Wednesday, which starts on Tuesday night and finishes on Wednesday day. So the Vesach Chedesh is correctly the night of the 5th of Shvat, wrong on the screen, and to separate also the whole entire Jewish Wednesday, if you will, the night and day of Wednesday, because it happens to be the 30th day from when the period began. Now, in the next month, the period started on this month, rather, before you arrived at that Wednesday. She had a period the day before. She had a period on the 4th day, and she's still bleeding. Her period continues on the 5th of Shvat, and the 6th of Shvat, and the 7th of Shvat is continuing. So can you cancel the 5th or not? So one opinion is you have to worry about both on the month of Adar to separate the 4th and the 5th. Other opinion is no, you don't have to worry about the 4th because that was the most recent one. Again, only about the 4th, not the 5th, because since the 5th passed without the period starting on that day, the 5th is no longer a thing.
Well, I mean, if the 4th is the day, then it's likely the 5th will also continue, right? So, I mean, logically.
So even though the way that the Israeli Rabbanim are paskin is they're saying the period didn't start that day. So don't tell me her period starts because it's a 5th day. The period didn't start the 5th day; it started on the 4th day. Other Rabbanim saying, well, she's still bleeding, so don't say the 5th is canceled because just because it didn't start that day. As long as she's still bleeding, we can cancel. That's the two. So and this analogy, the screen is also wrong over here. I don't know why it has it for the daytime. It's supposed to be for the nighttime. I know what I was doing that day. They have to fix this. Either way, but it has to do with whatever time it was. If it was nighttime, it's daytime. In my analogies over here, I have it all starting by daytime. And yet over here, it's a nighttime. I'm sorry, it's a daytime. If the period, okay, pregnant nursing women. So just because you did the pregnancy test, and therefore you know your period is not going to start for a while, you still have to keep all the dates the first month. Number two, nursing women, they get a period, they also need to keep a calendar. Just because you're nursing and it's unlikely you get a period as often, still you have to plug into the calendar whatever dates you do see. Now let's get to the calculation. Then you have to put it into the calendar. Put in the day, and then you put it when it stopped. Yeah, whenever it started, when it stopped, you put it. You plug. Nothing to put in. Nothing to put in. What are you going to put in? So a pregnant woman, the first month has to concern herself with whatever is remaining from her. And nursing woman, whenever if she doesn't have a period, she doesn't have a period. But if she has a period, she has to put it into the calendar. What does haflaga mean? Haflaga means this is unique opinion of the Rebbe. Other opinions say you go by. Okay, why should I confuse with other opinions? Other opinions say you go by between when one period starts till the next period starts. The Alter Rebbe's opinion is the way you calculate her personal interval is seeing how much time is there between her period finished till the next period starting. To the end of period 1, beginning of period 2, that's her personal clock for how long her period is. The interval between the end of one period and the beginning of the next period. So when that second period finishes, you have to separate an exact date that the period would begin if she had the same clock as last time. What if she had, let's say, 32 oinos, 32 periods of day? The word oina means a time period. So there's 32, every day has 2 oinos, every day has 2 periods, 2 time periods. So in a week, there are 14 time periods. And so her personal interval, let's say, is 32. It means 31, she was clear, and the 32nd is when she had her period. If you count from when she did the hefsek tara, count 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So after 2 weeks, after her first period, which is a week after she went to Mikvah out, so then she had a little more than a week after she goes to Mikvah. So then you have to. So after her period finishes, you got to be together for the 31 oinus, and the 32nd one you have to separate. If the interval gets bigger, old interval is canceled. That means if now in the next period you waited this 32nd one and she didn't get the period at the 32nd. 32nd is now over. Now the period gets the interval is now 43. So you ought to be together till 43. You have to worry anymore about 32. The analogy Rabbi Chaikin gave us was of a baby going up steps. Baby goes up steps, and you're standing behind the baby, and you want to make sure that the baby's not going to fall down. So you check the baby's able to walk up 3 steps. So you don't worry about 3 steps. Baby falls the 4th step, you stand behind him on the 4th step. If now the baby walks up 5 steps, and then it falls on the 6th step, you no longer worry about the 4th step anymore. You only worry about the 6th step. So the interval gets bigger. So that's a sign of a greater health, really, because the this is sort of like a whatever the word I'm going to use. It's going to be the wrong word, especially I don't know who's listening to our shir tonight. Either way, the veset is canceled. The veset is canceled when the interval gets bigger, and the veset remains if it gets smaller. So it means if it goes from 43 to 32 to 20, you have to separate for all those days. If it goes from 23 to 32 to 40, you cancel them as it gets bigger. If the interval gets smaller, both intervals are kept. You follow? Okay, so here, what happens over here? The period began on the first day of Adar, Chodesh, by daytime, and it finished in the 5th of Adar. So, and then the next period began. Right, she went to Mikvah, the emes for Mikvah. She went to Mikvah on the following week, and then Friday night, the 13th of Adar. And 2 days after she went to Mikvah, her period begins. So how long will you have to separate for? What interval do you have to separate for? If you count, there is between the Mikvah night and her period, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 oynes. This is a very rare situation, but it's possible that there's a very short time between the mikveh and the period. And so the halacha would be, after she goes to mikveh, which will be over here, she has to count the same amount of time as the last period began, which means 1, 2, 3, 4. She has to count 3, she'll have to be together with her husband, and the 4th one she has to separate. You follow? No. Try again. Here's a hefsek tara, right? So how many oynes did she have clear? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. And the 19th one is when her period began. So when she does, she makes an HC's hefsek tara. She checks herself after her period finishes over here. Yeah? She goes to mikveh as a question mark because the app is no, the HT is because she hasn't put into account that they were successful yet. So it automatically puts in, was there an HT on the 5th day? And you was putting yourself when it actually happens. So let's say she actually has a successful examination on the 5th day. So a week later, she goes to mikveh and she counts from the time of her hefsek tara 19 oynes. Just like over here was 19 until from the hefsek tara till her period. Also over here, she counts 19, and the 19th she has to separate. Could be together for 18. Well, not the whole 18 because the first week is she hasn't gone to mikveh yet. But once she gone to mikveh, she be together for a total of 3 more oynes, and the 4th one she has to separate because that was the exact amount of time it was last time. You're saying because you're tired because when you got it. Okay, good. When is that flaga? The flaga is going to be the 19th oina from when the hefsek tara was. So it doesn't go by dates over here. It goes by her personal time. She had what? You're right. 4 because I didn't count the mikveh night. You're right. The mikveh night is the first time to be together. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 5th one they have to separate. Thank you. It's a mitzvah to be together on the mikveh night. That's right. So you follow or not? So this is 19. On the 19th Eina. That's when the period began over here. If you count from here to here, from here when it stopped to here when it started again, right? This is the 19th one from the end of this period to the beginning of the next period. So when this period finishes, you have to separate also on the 19th. 1/19 passes, you ought to be together, but that specifically you have to separate. Okay. It is possible to have several days of haflaga. As I mentioned before, if the next haflaga is shorter, so you have to keep the 19th and the 18th and the 17th and the 16th. But if it gets longer, it is canceled. Now, it may seem there's a lot of days are going to be added to this. Sometimes you could have like a lot of days added, and then in one time, all of them are canceled at once. It's not as cumbersome as it may seem. So you can have more than one day of a haflaga. Haflaga is here, like in this analogy, you have the 46 you have to separate, the 48 you have to separate, which are both less than 30 days. So just an example, it's possible to have more than one haflaga, because since it got smaller, you have to separate both the 48th and the 46th. Okay, there are some chumras which we do not keep. Just want to be aware of them because you hear about them and just know, familiar what this is. There is something called Zarua. The Zarua is of the opinion that you have to separate, in addition to the actual Eina, when the period might begin, is to all separate the Eina before that. So everything we said till now, you have to add another Eina before that. We don't pass like that. But there is such an opinion that called Chumras Zarua. In addition to separating on the exact time when the period began, we also have to separate 12 hours before, or the Eina before. The Rebbe Rashab writes, based upon the opinion of the Rosh, he says that it's worth it to do a b'dika after her longest interval was passed. Let's say her recent interval was 48. So he says, and now she may be becoming pregnant, you don't know. He says you should do a b'dika every single time you're together until 3 months passes, because you don't know when it's going to start. That's what Rabbi Rashab says. However, Rabbi Heller says that there's not a chumrah that we should keep, because this is something which could mess up shalom bias, and it's not a chumrah on our level. So it's not although Rabbi Rashab says to do it, it's not meant for people in our time. And so, though you may read about it and hear about it, you don't have to do a b'dika just only do b'dikas on the time the Torah says the b'dika, which is on the exact time of her personal interval. You don't have to do it another b'dika every time you're together until 3 months pass. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to share tonight. Any questions, any comments, criticism? Go ahead.
What's on the calendar? What's the 48 and what do those numbers represent again?
This is her between one period and the next period.
Okay.
There was 46, and then onos.
Right.
And before that, between one period and the next period, there was 48. So she has to give both. Then this is the Vesach Chodesh, so you have all of them together. Here's her 2 personal haflagas. Then there is time of the month. It was apparently in the analogy that I was making. Her period began on the 9th, on the night of the 15th of Adar, and since Adar has 29 days, so the 30th day is also going to be the same date as the 15th of Adar, and therefore you separate, because of Vesach Chodesh separate the nighttime, because in a bain is to separate the daytime as well. Okay, any other questions? Rabbi Frimmerman has brought here a very great book called Family Purity by Rabbi Jacobs. It's the translation of Rabbi Farkash's Sefer, and it's $25. I want to buy it. Not Jacobs. Oh, it's another translation of it. It's a bit same. His book is also based upon Rabbi Farkash's Sefer. It's a different one. It's great, fantastic. Rabbi Farkash's Sefer translated in English, which is a really great thing. I think I'm gonna get one myself. Thank you very much. I'm gonna buy it. All right. Any other questions? Okay, I'll stop here then. Chazak Baruch. Thank you everyone for joining. Any Zoom people have questions? All right. Good night. Sei gesund. Tzachar Rabba. Thank you very much. Sure. My pleasure.